Hello, Link341. Welcome to yet another lecture on vowels in Linguistics 341 Introduction to Phonetics. This time we will be talking about vowels around the world, and the goal is to introduce you to all the vowels around the world, eventually to all the vowels that are in the IPA chart, right? And there are a couple of things to keep in mind, and the first one that we repeated many times, especially in classes, is that resonant frequencies are primarily based on the length of the speaker's vocal tract, that is the length of the open tube, right? Our vocal tract is an open tube, and the length of the vocal tract will influence the resonant frequencies, which are called formants, right? We've seen how we can measure, for example, F1, F2, and so on and so forth. The longer the vocal tract, the lower the formant frequencies, right? It just needs more time for the standing wave to resonate, and that's basically it, right? So, a thought question for you might be, what effect might lip rounding have on formant frequencies? And as you might assume, lip rounding will lower both formant frequencies because it's prolonging the tube, right? If you have a formant frequencies like this in a regular tube, and then you prolong it, you're lengthening the tube right out there. So it will lower both frequencies. Another question for you is, or not a question, maybe a thought, is that rounded vowels like oo and o are often fronted in modern English, right? So we front them all the time, and we have some kind of right, somewhere there in the middle of the chart. And certainly certain words will be produced in a normal way, quote unquote, right, in a way that is described maybe in the textbook, like this one. Okay.
Booed.
Have to increase the volume.
Booed.
Right. And
Bowed.
booed. Right.
Booed. Bowed.
Right. Booed and bowed. Whereby we have, because these are very back vowels, we have low F1 and low F2, or relatively low F2. Actually, for this one even more so, bowed, but you can see that the lowering of the F2 is noticeable here. However, for example, my mentor and your professor on some courses, Dr. Steve Winters, is from that part around in Minnesota. So he grew up in those parts of America, and for him, oo and o are very back vowels, and if you have very back vowels, then you will have almost the overlapping of the F2 and F1. So as you can see here, especially, they are almost overlapping in bowed.
Bored.
It's not even, he did not produce it as a diphthong, it's more bowed.
Bored.
Right?
Booed.
Booed. And these are, of course, different from those ones that he heard in California. So he heard some vowels in California, and they sound like this.
Booed.
Oops.
Bowed.
Right? So this one is very fronted.
Booed.
And when it's fronted, then the F2 is increased, right? This one as well, you can see F1, F2.
Bowed.
Right? Bowed. And that's quite typical of certain American speech. So these are the IPA chart symbols, or the symbols of all the vowels used contrastively in the world in the IPA, right? And as we know, this is E, a, a. These come to you for free right now, as well as these. So all of these English vowels that we've learned about, they come to you for free. These two are central vowels. This is barred e, or a little bit back e. For example, e, and this is not u, but u, right? More often you will hear this barred u in speech, especially in Canadian and American speech, and we know these, right? We also know about this gap I, schwa here, wedge, and open o. However, there are certain counterparts to those, right? So E has its counterpart, which is rounded. So all of the symbols to this in this corner or in this left-hand side are unrounded, and their counterparts would be rounded, right? So here is E, or right? You just round your lips and produce the same vowel. The tongue height remains the same, and frontness and backness is the same. All right. So we are going to cover first some front rounded vowels. The best way to do this is to do it like this. So the first one is high front tense vowel, which is produced like this, right? And you can go out and sing along. So this one would be E, but just round your lips. Right? And yeah, this one is interesting. This one would be a high mid front vowel, right? And we'll see where they occur in which languages a bit later. But for now, focus on the production of these vowels. Right? So it's like and this is a low mid front vowel. And this one does not exist in any language. Is there because of Daniel Jones and his cardinal vowels. He just wanted to have a counterpart to something like that, right? But it's not attested in any of the languages in the world, right? Okay, now that you've sang along to these, we might want to take a look at French front rounded vowels. So here is a rounding contrast between the highest E and U, and the contrast is quite observable in French.
Li,
Li,
lu,
lu, and
lu,
lu, right? So you're going this way, E, U, and U, right? And now
les, le, lo, les, le,
right?
lo,
Lo,
la,
right? So in different languages in the world, so for English this might be even further back than it is for French, but for French it might be a bit to the front. So different languages of the world will have a little bit different vowel charts, right? On average, right? When you average out all of the speakers and you get their measurements or the measurements of the formants. Right now we know what they are, so you get the some kind of average that's not typical of English, right? So French is different from English, even though they might have the same vowels, and that's that phonological space that we are hearing, which differs from the phonetic space, right? Dutch has front rounded vowels like this:
bit, but,
bit,
bit,
and it does not have a counterpart here.
beet,
Put,
put, bet,
pit,
put,
put, right? and bat.
bat,
Oh, sorry, bat. This is bat. Orthography led me, which should not be the case. So these are orthographic in Dutch, but it's a.
bait,
And this one is not even diphthong. It's just maybe a diphthong in Dutch, right? But not diphthong in English. So it would be a, right?
bait,
Bait. And
buit,
bout. It sounds like bout, but
buit,
it has this wedge and e in the end, which is very difficult to produce, but you can give it a shot,
buit,
right? Okay, now how does this all look like on a spectrogram? So we have go back to this one. So we have lip, so rounded and unrounded, rounded and unrounded vowel, and the lip rounding will change, right? It will change the quality of a vowel, and we can see for li, F2 remains high. For li, it is lowered, right?
li, lu,
Right. So what does it do? What does the rounding do in this case? Well, it lowers both frequencies, but especially F2, form a number 2, because the longer the tube, the greater the distance, and it takes more time. So it lowers this form and frequency here. Yeah. Okay, then we have front versus
lu,
back.
lu, lu,
Lu, right? So as I said, also backing the vowel, of course, will lower the formant, and this one is front, this French vowel, and this one is also French, but it exists in English. So because they have this contrast between front rounded vowel, high front rounded vowel, and the high back rounded vowel, they will retain this contrast by producing a very noticeable, observable ooh, right, back,
lu,
and ooh to the back, right? Then we have unrounded versus rounded mid vowels,
les,
such as le,
le,
and you can see here that F2 also decreases or falls down. Here F3 also is quite lower than this F3, so we have the same principle. Right, here the F3 is relatively the same, stays the same. Okay, we have front versus back.
le, lo, le, lo,
right, whereby as we can see, if it's a frontal vowel, then F2 will be higher, yeah, right, and if it's a back vowel, it will come down. This initial F2 that is high is due to the L liquid, which we will learn about hopefully this term. We will hopefully have time for that, for the liquids. Okay, now German has a similar contrast. It has a contrast between tense and lax, and also it has rounded and unrounded vowels. So
bieten,
beaten,
bitten,
bitten, right?
wüten,
Wüten,
bütten,
bitten, right? So this one is quite
wüten, bütten,
obvious, right? So there is a contrast between tense and lax in there as well, which is good to mention, because you might, as I said, these rounded, these vowels here, you can assume they are all tense, right? So all of these can be assumed to be tense vowels. However, if a language has this distinction between long and short vowels, such as German, then you might have tense e and lax e as well. So both of these. So just pay attention to that. All right, and these are
wüten, bütten,
right the same, and
buten,
buten,
butter,
butter, right?
buten,
Where
butter,
we have high back rounded and high front rounded, right? But distinction is between tense and lax.
bütten,
Oops. Okay, so now we've talked about rounded, front-rounded vowels, right? So we're left with those, and now we have an idea of how we can produce them, right? They're more easily, so these here are more easily produced than these here back vowels, right? Okay, terrible drawing, but that's okay. So these here would be more difficult to produce. And why is that so? You know, that's a question for you until I answer it, and I will answer it right now. So basically, what you need to do when you're producing this vowel, which is a counterpart to oo, you have to unround the lips. So in oo, you have to say oo, right? And which is more difficult to unround the vowels than to round them, especially if they're somewhere in mid, and also compared with an old friend of ours, which is low back rounded, where you don't have such a distinctive difference between this one and okay, let me just change it. Yeah, and maybe this one, because when you're producing your lips are automatically not in the position to be rounded anyways, and when you want to round them, yeah, that pretty much happens. It's difficult to do this. It's more difficult to do so because there is no so much space for rounding them, right? So we have two unrounded here vowels, such as which is this one, which is a counterpart to oo. So and this one, which we sometimes call ram's horns, because it looks like ram's horns, which is a counterpart to o, of course. So right, let me go back to it. It's right here. Okay, anyway, we've talked about wedge. Wedge usually in English goes a little bit towards here, right? It's not really on the spot, right, where we talked about. So yeah, and when you're producing open O, you can think about four in English, four, o, and that's your open O. Usually important for, remember when we played sopranos to you. So that's how you can produce O, and its counterpart would be a wedge, right, which does resemble a lot schwa, right? And that's why I was okay with you transcribing them both in both ways, although I'd prefer schwa in some places, right? Okay, so compare this to these two with an old friend, which is also rounded, right? Here, as I said, it's a little bit different. Yeah, I mean, it's not different, it's the same. So this one is rounded, this one is unrounded, and we learned about both. Okay, so let's listen to these again. Right. So this one is rounded, right? And these two are unrounded. These we find these vowels in Vietnamese. Vietnamese has, for example, three contrast way of these high vowels.
T,
T,
tư,
tu,
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 tê,
te,
tơ,
te,
tô,
to,
té,
te, right?
to.
Ta. And as I was just telling you how you can produce these two, right? Wedge and open O. And this is how they sound in real speech, in real language, right? In the speech of the speakers speak certain language, right? A lot of alliteration there. and this is what they look like on our IPA chart in some ideal world, right? And that's why it's a little bit difficult to grab those and to say, okay, well, this is not a wedge, right? Well, it is in this language, right? And how are they realized? We can see here, these are not super great recordings, but they are they will do the job. So this one is E,
T,
and this one is
Tư,
they're both unrounded vowels, but one is front, the other is back, and we can see with back vowels, of course, the F2 and even F1, but F2 especially lowers, right? It's lower in its frequency, and we can see unrounded versus rounded vowels, whereby rounded are have an even lower frequency.
Tư, Tu,
Yeah, and these are two counterparts. All right, the next one or the next ones are
Tê,
te,
Tơ,
right? Ram's horn again, front versus back. If you go back, you are lowering F2. If you round it, if you go back and round a vowel, then you are going even lower. Something like this.
Tơ, Tô,
Right, so these are both mid-high back vowels. All right, and these vowels occur in Turkish, which you will have to for your production exercise. So listen to them carefully.
Kiss,
Kiss,
küss,
kus. These are front vowels.
kız,
Kus,
kus,
kus.
kes,
Kes,
kös,
kus. Kes, kus. Yeah.
kas,
Kas,
kos,
kos. And you can see that they were presented in a way that it resembles a vowel chart, right? Something like this. Yeah, that would be the resemblance. And this is what Turkish has. So pay attention to those. British English is quite specific. For example, when I before coming to Canada, I was mainly exposed to British English, and I was mainly doing some transcription work with British English, so I have this perspective of both, which is great now. And I'm an outsider in terms of not being a native speaker, right? So British English has this three-way distinction between o, right? Whereby Canadian English might have only one, maybe this one,
bod,
right? Or maybe in this one,
bard,
but most certainly not this one.
board,
Yeah, which is difficult for you to hear and maybe distinguish. But it's there, it exists, and it's used in many words in British English, especially both, right? And so on and so forth.
board, bod, bard,
Yeah, this is a three-way distinction in British English, which is also called received pronunciation for different reasons. It's also sometimes called Queen's English, so the English that spokespersons are required to use on television and in public, right? So we call it standard, right? Standardized version of the British English. This is hard,
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 hod,
hard,
hoard,
right? So you're just in this case you should be following the APA chart. So for example, this one is open back, right, but not rounded, and this one is rounded, and this one is a little bit higher, so you shouldn't open the jaw so much for that one. So so o, right? Something like that. Okay, where was I? Here, yeah. So these are low back vowels, and again, with these are both back low vowels. For example, this one, unrounded versus rounded, you can see that even F2 is pretty close to F1, lower than here for sure.
hard, hod,
hod. And here in between hod and hod,
hod,
uh,
hord,
you can see here that F2 is even lower. The distinction is even clearer in this case. Okay, there are other things to be aware of when there is lip rounding, but we won't talk about them right now. There is a little bit of this kind of a, or as if it's making a lip rounding itself, the spectrogram, so that can happen, and we'll see maybe why in upcoming lessons. All right, so I'll go back to my slides like this and say, well, we have covered all of these pointy vowels, right? So vowels are on the edges of the vowel chart. However, we haven't covered the central ones, and yeah, the central ones. So this is a we mentioned already the barred U, but we haven't mentioned barred I or barred E. We haven't mentioned this one as well, which is like a, you see close mid rounded vowel, and we will talk about this one. These are quite prominent in languages, especially these two. They occur in English, right? These occur in some other languages, which we will see right now. Schwa, we talked about schwa, it's a neutral vowel, so there is no need to mention it right now. It appears in basically every language in the world. For the rest, such as this one is like a low central, low to back, central mid vowel, right? Maybe not low, central, and between open, mid, and open vowel, and it's very rarely used in languages, and maybe in some dialects of German, such as northern dialects of German. It's also used, I believe, in Cantonese too, right? If I'm not mistaken. Then there is this guy here, which is, so this is one would be, near open central, right? And this one will be open mid central rounded vowel, so that definitely rounded vowel, and it occurs in a few languages such as Afrikaans and Navajo. And this guy here would be central mid unrounded vowel, and it's found in some forms in Korean and Polish, such as mish. Polish, when they say mouse, they would say something like that, like instead of mish, they would say mesh, right? Something like that. They're not very common. That's why we will not pay attention to them so much. So yeah, this would be high unrounded central barred E or barred I vowel, and it sounds like this. So as if you're saying E, but you're not fronting your tongue so much, you're backing it up a little bit. E, right? And this one will be oo, and then you just need to front the tongue, right, to make the tongue go to the front of your mouth. So instead of saying ooh, you say and it's used quite, yeah, this is a good example, right? So this one would be right? And this one is a reversed epsilon, right? The one that you've sometimes transcribed, and you didn't have to, you weren't required to when we had transcription exercises. This one is sometimes occurs in British English, and we'll see where, but it's basically mid-low unrounded, right? And this one is mid-high rounded, a little bit higher. Get your tongue a little bit higher there, in this vowel space, and produce it like this. Yeah, this one is a little bit towards the back, so these are taken from different languages, of course. So this one would be right, somewhere there. Okay, so barred I is quite prominent in Russian, and there is a contrast between this barred I and E, and it sounds like this.
Выть.
Выть,
Вить.
вить, right? And this E is quite pronounced, and this one is a little bit
Выть.
wait. It goes a little bit lower towards central, but it's still barred I.
Был.
Bill,
Бил.
Bill. Okay, and these are just some diacritics for palatalization that we will talk about later. Okay, this is what it looks like for a front vowel.
Бил.
Bill, because it you can hear even the schwa-like nature of it. The F2 goes down, but it's initially very high, and that's important. And here F2 is not initially very high. It's almost as if it's as if it were a schwa. So you get that sense that it is central here, especially in the middle.
Был.
Bill, right? So that's what it looked like on spectrogram. And barred U is prominent in Norwegian. It's also prominent in English, as dude, right? Super, and words like that. But we can see how it works contrastively in Norwegian.
B,
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 B. So these are front. These are front unrounded contrasts in these two vowels in Norwegian, and these are central and back rounded vowels.
boo, boo,
Boo,
boo,
boo, right? And there is a contrast in Norwegian. The front versus central vowels distinction on the spectrogram looks like this.
B,
B, or actually E, B,
B,
right? And this one would be even towards a little bit towards a, even backer, right?
boo,
Boo, right? And you can see that F2 and F3 are lowered, right? They're low in their position. And if we know where F2 and F3 should be, we know, or at least F2. Let's just remind ourselves of where F2 should be. So here you will find F2, right? And it goes from low to high. So the lower the F2, the backer the vowel, and usually that's what happens with rounding as well. If you compare these two, for example, right? Rounding lowers it. And this is F1, right? Which does not change too much in these vowels. It's quite steady in that sense, because it corresponds to the tongue height, and that's like a first formant frequency, first standing wave that gets through our tube. It's not influenced so much as the F2 and the rest of the formants, especially F3. Okay, now that we know this, we can go to these two, which are barred U,
boo,
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 boo. Right, you can see clearly that F2 is almost overlapping with F1, and here there is a difference because this one is fronter, right there. Okay, and reversed epsilon. This one is interesting because it's used in words such as bird, but in English it would be
bird,
bird,
heard,
heard, right? And this one is
bud,
bud,
hud,
hud, right? Whereby you can see that this one is backer vowel because of lower F2 or just overlapping F2, and a little bit even higher vowel than reversed epsilon because of its higher F1, right? So that is the indication. So British English distinguishes between central and back unrounded vowels and the mid-low region, like these two. Okay. Just so you know, RP stands for received pronunciation. I told you the reason for that. The O phoneme is realized as O. It's as if they have Canadian raising already. So that's how this realized. And this is Peter Ladefoged, who is who was a British phonetician.
Bode.
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 Bode, right? And Bruce Hayes, who was an American phonetician. RP is non-rhotic dialect. We talked about that at the beginning of this course. Lots of extra diphthongs with of glide. So when I was studying British transcription and received pronunciation transcription, I had all of these. So they add I, O, or O, and so on and so forth to add to those vowels that you have in North American English. These is a like beer,
Here.
here, right?
Hair.
Ha,
Ha.
ha, right? There is an off glide here that we call schwa. So this schwa follows these full vowels, so to say. In something very characteristic of British or typical of British English is, of course, U. U is also sometimes considered a diphthong, and it can appear after alveolars in RP, such as news, suit, assume, presume, and so on. A lot of these with sume, while Americans would say news, suit, and I don't know, instead of whether you would say beauty, booty, yeah, that would be different word for that one. So I guess when it does not affect the meaning, the Americans would not use this, right? Or North Americans, I mean Canadians as well. Swedish is, for example, language, Nordic language, and Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, those Norse languages have lots of vowels and have lots of distinctions between the vowels, and it would be nice to sing along. So these are front and rounded vowels, and this is a E, which is long.
Rita.
Rita.
Rit.
Rit.
Reta.
Reta.
Rätt.
Ret.
Räta.
Reta.
Här.
I don't know why they transcribe them like this with this rita, and it's advanced, so I don't like that transcription for some reason. But you can see all of their front and rounded vowels. Now front rounded vowels would be
Rita.
rita,
Nytta.
nytta. Yeah, this one will be short, and this one is here, right? There. Okay.
Ruta.
Ruta. Okay.
Rött.
Rut.
Röta.
Röta.
Rött.
Rött.
Hör.
Yeah, those are the vowels in Swedish are quite difficult to acquire or to learn if you're a speaker of this language. So they have almost all of these right there. And let's see what their back vowels are.
Rota.
Ruta.
Rot.
Rut. Rut.
Råta.
Rota.
Rått.
Rut. Yeah,
Råta. Rått.
I can't even hear the difference between these two.
Rata.
Rata, okay, this one is different.
Ratt.
Rat. Okay, so you get a sense, sense of what they sound like at least, and refer to those when you want to produce them, because these are real life vowels, even if you cannot hear very well some distinctions between these two. Try and refer to these recordings and to refer to this vowel space. Right. Usually languages have only 3 or 5 vowels separated evenly in the vowel space. In triangle, here is a popular vowel space option. My language has this kind of vowel space option. That's why it's difficult for me sometimes to produce proper diphthongs in English, and that messes with maybe some kind, or it can lead to some kind of miscommunication, but often it does not. And this vowel space is present, for example, in Spanish, Hawaiian, Swahili, and we've already talked about that, and I think we've already listened to these, but it's nice to listen to them again and sing along. So
Masa, mesa, misa,
misa.
masa,
Sorry,
mesa, misa, mosca,
mosca,
musa,
musa,
Kaka,
kaka,
Keke,
kaka, keke,
Kiki,
kiki,
Koko,
koko,
Kuku.
kuku,
pata,
pata,
peta,
peta,
pita,
pita,
pota,
puta,
puta,
pota, puta, right?
Ma, me, mi, mo, mu.
Ma, me, mi, mo, mo, right? And this is a 5 vowel space. 5 vowels in vowel systems are rarely, if ever, distributed like this. So why is that? So why is this considered a bad vowel space? You can think about it, but I guess the answer would be, or the answer was provided by the what we call adaptive dispersion or dispersion theory, developed by Bjorn Lindblom and Johan Liljenkrantz, who were Swedish speakers and Swedish scientists. They had an idea that languages tend to maximize the distance between vowels in this acoustic space. This helps listeners perceive contrast between the vowels. A phonological phenomenon that is, of course, a kind of a consequence of this adaptive dispersion theory is what we call a change shift. If one vowel moves, the rest follow suit to maintain distinctions. And we've talked about a little bit about the Great Lakes shift. One change shift is currently taking place in the northern United States. It's prevalent in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, and many places in between. And yeah, I'll play the next one. I don't have the media for this one, though not in Toronto, but maybe in Windsor. I think this should be some kind of Dr. Winters' joke, but that's okay. So general bad is ash, right? Vowel ash is used in this word. However, in Great Lakes, it can appear something like yeah.
We actually tried to get his attention a few times because he was playing. So he was happy to be in there, but I don't think mom and dad were happy to be in there. Happy to be in there, but I don't think mom and dad were too happy.
Yeah, I don't think mom and dad.
Like mom and dad were too happy.
Mom and dad were too happy, right? So that happens in the Great Lakes region. Then we have bod, which is bad, bod, which is bod, and bus, which is boss, and bed, which is bad, right? So what happens here, according to the adaptive dispersion theory, would be that the vowels, right? If e moves to e, right? It moved already here. Then this e would love to escape from being merged with e, right? So we don't want a merger here. It would love to escape because we want to maintain the distinction between these vowels in speech, as we want to perceive, I don't know, bad or bad and bad as two different words, right? And that's why e goes clockwise towards a wedge, right? Instead of bad, you have bad, right? And instead of I don't know, bus, you have boss, and instead of boss, you have or no boss. Instead of aw, you have ah, and instead of maybe hard, you have had, right? something like that. So it's clockwise, right? And this is what it sounds like, the fronting. So
Hard.
should be somewhere here,
Hard.
I guess. High F1, relatively low F2.
Hard.
And you can see all
Hard.
of these, oops, I'll do this. You can see all of these dots, which are actually how some speakers produce them, but when you front this vowel, it sounds like this.
Hard. Hard. Hard.
Even fronter, had,
Hard.
right? So it has now a high F2. Then A is raising, as we said, like raising here. A, I guess, should be somewhere there.
Had.
Right? But it goes a bit towards front and it's raised.
Had.
Had. Even here it's more central, but still very high. So A is being raised, and A is backing, right? So
Ahead.
right? In ahead, you have A that's
Ahead.
more like wedge, or somewhere here in this vicinity. All right, and it looks like this where we see the lowering of F2, right? F2 is being lowered, and that's what it means for our vowel to back up, right? These are female talkers saying
Hard.
hard,
Hod.
hard,
Hod.
hard, right? This one is even more towards O, and these are the examples of female talkers saying hood,
Hood.
hood,
Hood.
hood. You can hear how front it is,
Hood.
hood, right? Maybe this one, the most standard one. This one too,
Hood.
but this one is definitely front.
Hood.
So it does happen in female speakers, and we've noticed that in New Zealand this vowel shift takes place, and that's a vowel shift that's also clockwise.
End.
Like
End. Insects.
insect. We've been listening to this, I think, some time ago, but this one should be, instead of A, it's more like I.
End.
End, right? So New Zealand vowel shift occurs as well. Okay, a word of caution though. The vowel system of English can vary greatly from one dialect to another. Example, vowels of Canadian English have shifted away from the American counterparts. So what happens here is that we have shifted.
6 spoons of fresh snow peas, 5 thick slabs of blue cheese, and maybe a snack for her brother Bob.
For her brother Bob.
6 spoons of
And
fresh
this is
snow
unshifted, right?
peas, 5 thick slab snack for her brother Bob.
Bob. Let me hear it again.
6 snack for her brother Bob.
For her brother Bob, right? And here,
Sick brother Bob.
Bob. It's shifted, and here it's unshifted. There is a shift from A to A.
I usually smoke about half a pack a day.
Half a pack a day.
I usually smoke about half a pack.
Half a pack a day, right? And we've seen that there is also A to A shift underway.
Head.
Bed.
Bed. Or bed.
Head.
This is head instead of head.
Bid.
Bid.
Hood.
Hood. Or hood and
Hood.
hood, right? Yeah, it's even difficult for me to produce them that way, but this is a newer quote-unquote shift underway, and what you have maybe noticed is that that there is a shift That's a bit different from the Great Lakes shift or New Zealand shift. This shift is counterclockwise. So U is being fronted to U,
Spoons.
spoons, and E is being lowered,
Bid.
bid, and E
Head.
is being lowered even more so, right?
Bed.
Bed,
Head.
had, right? So this is a proper one, and this one A is being lowered to. Oops. I cannot play. It's being lowered as
Half.
well.
Half.
Half. That would be appropriate one, and this is the lowered version.
Half.
Half. And is becoming
Bob.
Bob,
Bob.
right? And this U
Hood.
is becoming
Hood.
hood, right? So it's more centralized, but the shift is right counterclockwise according to the principles of the adaptive dispersion theory. The diagram shift looks something like this. As we said, there are movements like that. Never goes to O though, so pay attention to that. All right. The IPA contains a few diacritics which are especially relevant to vowels. The most important of these is the diacritic for nasalization, and we've used it many times in our transcriptions. But in English, there are no nasalized vowels that are contrastive in the language. So we don't have a vowel that is a phoneme that would be nasal. In other languages, there are such nasalized vowels. So nasalized vowels are produced by lowering the velum, and we drew that so many times, right? So if you lower the velum, and air can get through your nose, right? Let's assume here here should be nose, right? Okay, yeah. Beak rather than nose, but that's okay. You get the point. Okay. Okay, since I started to draw, I'll draw it. So all right, so your vocal folds are vibrating and the air is being pushed through your nose, also through your vocal tract, through both of these, but through your nose, and that's how you produce nasal vowels. Contrastive nasal vowels are found in 20% of the world's languages, and we notoriously know about French that has so many nasal vowels. For example, it has
Le.
le,
La.
so, and this one is
Le.
le,
Lundi.
lundi,
La.
la,
Lan.
lan,
Lo.
lo,
Long.
long, right? How are you going to produce them? Well, simply try to say, instead of len, you don't produce the n part as if you want to say len, but you don't produce it. You say le, right?
Lin.
Yeah, this one is a bit higher, but this one is good.
Lan.
Long, right? So that's how you would produce it. And this one,
Long.
as if you want to say long, but you don't say the last part, and that's the anticipation or anticipatory method of producing a nasalized vowel, actually, right? Nasal vowel acoustics is very complex. The acoustics of nasals is very, very complex as well. They have something that we call antiformants, which we will talk about hopefully. Basically, there are two formants and antiformants for both the nasal and oral passageway. So the air is moving not only through your mouth, it's moving through your nose. So both of these create certain formants and antiformants. Nasalization expands bandwidth. These are like maybe the length between these two glottal pulses, but you don't have to worry about those right now. What happens here is that when the bandwidths are expanded, the formants are smeared, and you can see here that we have smeared formants at the end of this vowel. Right? You cannot really see them very well. Here is there are clearly two formants, and they end somewhere here, right? There is a lot of noise, background noise, but in this case it's very difficult to see where they are. Really, maybe here and here, I'm not sure, but or maybe up there, but it's smearing them a lot. Okay. Nasalization smears vowel bandwidths, which can obscure F1 high differences. High vowels sound low, and low vowels sound high. For example, North American, let's say South, in American South, you can produce pen,
Le,
and pin, but in French you will produce le, la. So it sounds low, right? That's why it sounded low on the previous slide.
Lo,
Low,
long,
long, right? So the vowel height in this case is quite affected, and you can see F1 here and F2, and with this one it's quite lower, right, in the F1 because of its nasalized version, as if you're producing American South pen or pen, right? Something like that. I guess people native to the American South would produce this better because it's their language. Of course, as we said, certain diphthongs can be nasalized, right? I've accepted if you nasalize the whole diphthong or just one part of the diphthong, but it's usually the second part of the diphthong that is being nasalized, and you can clearly see the recording messiness in the first one comparison to the second one, whereby the first one U is nasalized, right? So the spectrogram is quite smeared.
Bound. Bowed.
Right? And here you can see that very clearly this F2 and F1 they are changing in intensity, but they are quite visible. All right, there is something that we call nasal spreading. Nasal spreading is, and we were finishing in a couple of minutes. So nasal spreading is when nasalization spreads from consonants to vowels, right? And Sudanese, spoken in Indonesia, has a famous pattern of nasal spreading, which is blocked by certain consonants. And this is what happens in Sudanese. So known as nasalization in this one, pihak, and there is nasalization in these two. So nasal spreading occurs when you have one syllable nasal and the other syllable is nasal. So these two vowels that are nuclei, I guess, of the syllables or syllables are nasalized. Miha, nuhus, nia, nayang, right? And here you don't see it, right? There is no spreading. Nasal spreading is blocked. Muliat, nisar, natur, right? And let's say I'll let you think about that, and why is that so, right? Think about that phonologically. So there are certain consonants that block this, and I want you to think about why and which ones, right? Is there any pattern here? How do we measure nasality? Well, one of the techniques is to take a look at the spectrogram, right? Hear what the people are saying and see whether something is smeared. But there is a tool that we call nasometer, a tool that has been developed for studying the nasalization of vowels. And this tool is usually has been developed for studying nasalization of vowels and for being applied with children with cleft palate, for example, and after their surgery, because of the cleft palate, they cannot help it. They have to speak through their nose. So after the surgery, for example, you need some kind of techniques to train these young people, children, into producing non-nasal sounds, right? The nasometer here uses two microphones, so here they are, to measure airflow through both the nose and through mouth. So they are measuring the air pressure coming out through your nose and mouth at the same time, and there is some kind of display of that air pressure. I think we have one in the lab, but haven't used it. Just like a lot of other different gadgets. But it's a neat little equipment that can tell you how nasal something is. For example, the nasometer spits out readings of the amount of air flowing out of the nose and the mouth at the same time. Nasal vowels are concomitant, whereby the concomitant airflow through both mouth and nose is present, and nasal stops, where airflow goes only through nose, right? And with nasal vowels, you can see here that there is this vowel has a lot of a little bit less oral, this nasal flow than this one. Nyang, is quite nasalized, and for these here, you can see that nasality rises as the end of the vowel approaches. Natur, actually. Natur is, I should be familiar with this cellular actually, and you can see how where the nasal flow and the oral flow are. So the nasal flow of this one, it actually falls. I was reading the wrong diagram. So with nasal consonants, nasal flow is higher, and with nasal vowels, nasal flow is high, but as it approaches the end of the vowel, the oral flow becomes greater, and the same case is here, right? So that's how we can determine the level of nasality of the vowels with nasometer. All right, those were the vowels of the world. Try listening to them, try producing them, and I will see you in our next class, in our next lesson.